Hello everyone, I'm Norman Wahlberger, and today we're going to talk about scales, which are fundamental melodic frameworks for music. We have our chromatic scale of 12 tones, going from one note to the next note one octave above, in this case from C to C. But that's a lot of notes, and if we just use all of those notes, it's easy for the listener to feel a lack of sort of center. For example, if I make up a tune. You have a hard time, perhaps. It's not unpleasant, but it's a little bit too free. So most cultures end up restricting the notes that are used for songs, and typically certain notes are chosen to create a scale. And so we're going to talk about those today, but crucially we're going to introduce a notation to describe these scales, which is more mathematically and pleasantly organized than the usual story. So a good starting point is with a major scale, okay? Going from here to here, looks like this, one. Very easy, just the white notes. Now, how would we describe this? Well, we don't really want to describe the actual absolute positions because we recognize that the same scale could easily be translated. For example, we could move it up by one step or by another step. Right, so there's these 12 equivalent scales all having the same sort of relative structures. So we want to describe them all at the same time. So what we're going to do is we're going to describe the relations between successive notes. We're going to just record the intervals to go from one note to another. So starting from here to here, that's a two-step. Traditional nomenclature is calling that a whole tone, okay? And calling this a half tone, which is unfortunate because it's really this step from here to here, which is the fundamental unit here, right? We have 12, and this is 1, 2, 3, etc. So we're going to stick with that. We're going to say that this is a one-step, and from here to here is a two-step. So our major scale consists of a two-step, a two-step, a one-step, a two-step, a two-step, a two-step, and a one-step. So in short, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. That's a major scale. The next most important one is the minor scale. And there's a couple of different minors. I'm going to talk about this one here, the melodic minor, okay? So, there's a two-step, there's a one-step, a two-step, a two-step, a one-step, a three-step, and a one-step, okay? So it's 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 3, 1. The major and minor scales had 7 notes in them. There's other ones which have fewer. For example, a blues scale has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 notes before we get back to the tonic. So what are the intervals here? Well, from here to here, that's a minor third, which is sort of characteristic of blues. And that's a three-step, okay? So we have a three-step, and then a two-step, and then a one-step, followed by another one-step. So we have 2 consecutive one-steps there, and then another three-step and a two-step. So altogether, 3, 2, 1, 1, 3, 2. Blues is very important, very nice. Okay, but there are also shorter scales. For example, there's pentatonic scales found throughout Africa and Asia, China, Japan, other places. So the major pentatonic scale consists just of those 5 notes. Or if you want to keep carrying on to the octave. So how would we describe that? Well, again, just in terms of intervals. 2, two-step, two-step, three-step, two-step, three-step. So it's 3 two-steps involved and 2 three-steps involved. That's a pentatonic or a major pentatonic scale. There's also a minor pentatonic scale. So that's a 3-step, 2-step, 2-step, 3-step, 2-step. So again, we have 2 3-steps and 3 2-steps. Now these pentatonic scales can also be thought of in a different way on the piano. Okay? Conveniently, the piano has these black notes also, which I'm not using currently, but if we just shift to the black notes very temporarily, then we can realize the major pentatonic scale by playing the black notes, but starting with this one here, say, the leftmost of the group of 3. Or maybe up here. Does that sound the same as? It's the same, right? So that's another way of playing a pentatonic scale. And in fact, the minor pentatonic scale can also be found in the black notes, okay? But you just have to sort of start at a different spot. You start here, okay? By the way, the black notes are quite convenient for sort of improvising, especially if you don't have a lot of experience playing the piano. If someone just asks you to sit down on the piano and play something, and you've never done this before, my advice to you is ignore the white notes and just play on the black notes. It's not so hard to sound pleasant on the black notes because the black notes don't have any one tones amongst them. So the white notes have these two notes here which are adjacent, so there's a 1 step between them, and also these 2 notes which have a 1 step in between them. And if you play them both at the same time, then that tends to have a bit of a jarring, discordant effect, okay? Sometimes it's effective in special things. But even if you play these 2 notes, like this one here and here, if you play this one an octave down, play these 2 notes, it also has a slightly discordant kind of sound, although actually it's quite important in modern jazz, major 7. But anyway, so anyway, when you play with the black notes, you sort of automatically are removed from having to worry about that. So that's just a nice thing. So anyway, so it's interesting that the 2 pentatonic scales can be found purely in the black notes. And one more important scale that I'll mention is perhaps arguably the simplest one, actually, from a mathematical point of view. And that's when we say, okay, we're going to go from here to here, which is a range of 12, and let's just go up 2 at a time. Okay, so 2 at a time. Just take 2 steps. 2-step, 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 2-step. So that's sometimes called a whole tone scale. Sometimes called an Indian scale because it's used in Indian music. My TikTok improvisation called Even 6, number 1, is all based on this whole tone scale, which is, we might say it's a sort of a uniform 2-tone scale. Okay, so that's at least an introduction, and I especially want to promote this idea that we can express these scales mathematically in a pleasant way using this interval arithmetic, which is quite natural based on the underlying chromatic scale. And this also lends itself, as we'll see, to understanding chords in a very nice way, but also allows us to understand modes of scales. Okay, so it turns out that if you take a scale like this here, the major scale, then there's various variants of it called modes, and we can get at these modes quite pleasantly with this arithmetical nomenclature that we've introduced. I'm Norman Wildberger. Thanks for listening.